Hello, everyone. This is Aaron from CarNewsCafe.com. Today we have a pretty good subject. I have Nicholas here with me, and we're missing the atom component, but I think we'll soldier through anyway. Today we're going to talk about Tesla. Tesla, 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 our favorite subject. This time we are going to discuss whether or not Tesla is actually an automaker making cars or something else. I know Nicholas has a very interesting perspective on this.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is Nicholas signing in for Car News Cafe, and a big hello
Good
to our
evening.
Tesla-ready fans out there, fan and friends, I should say. Yeah, indeed. I mean, Tesla. Come on, what else can you talk about, right? The news is Tesla. Everything is Tesla, and yes, Elon Musk. It's Tesla. But indeed, you know, I'm noticing that the news now is actually finally saying the things that we've been writing about for the past 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and even in some cases for the past 2, 3 years ago. One of the things that I said very early on, and that really was about 2, 3 years ago, is that Tesla is not a car maker. And I know you probably don't agree with that, but I think Tesla is much, much more than that. So you want to take it away?
All right. Um, my contention is that Tesla makes cars and they do a lot of other stuff as a peripheral to that. And I don't think you totally disagree with that, but I think you have a different way of seeing that same point. Um, the way I see it, Elon Musk himself is basically a transportation mogul. What he's doing is he created Tesla Motors. Well, he joined up and you know the story. So
No,
he's
what happened? Tell
he's
us.
all right. A quick history recap.
At
Tesla
first,
Motors
there
was
was a
started by
birth in
a couple of
South
other guys,
Africa.
and then Elon Musk joined up as a primary investor. Basically, when the company started. So the company itself wasn't necessarily his idea, but I think most of us can agree that everything since then has been largely influenced by him. So regardless, you have Elon Musk
Actually,
himself,
careful,
and
you
what?
just open up a can of worms right there because everybody's going to say that it was Martin Eberhard and Elon Musk who got together and said, "Hey, let's make an electric vehicle." But anyway, potatoes, potatoes.
Yeah,
Go
well, go to the Tesla page and read the About Us. So
on.
anyway,
You mean after the lawsuits and everything? Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, sorry, I didn't say that.
the point is, um, Elon Musk himself, he heads currently two different companies. Both of those companies are doing transportation. He has Tesla Motors. They make cars, right? They used to sell the Roadster. Now they sell the Model S. Pretty quick, they're going to be selling the Model X. Also, he has a factory that builds cars, and he runs SpaceX, whose ultimate goal is to take people into space, transport into space, transportation. So, now that I've spelled it out so that even a third grader can understand it, I was just thinking
He
about what
just
I must have
demolished
sounded
my
like.
point. He demolished my whole point right there. How am I going to counter that one?
I
Sheesh.
just well I was just thinking about what I said and the way I said it mostly, and I was like, wow, I sound like a third grade teacher.
Absolutely. All hail to the teacher. The teacher here and is here.
So that's my point, is that they are a transportation company, and Tesla Motors specifically is making cars, and then they build things that go around those cars, such as the charging stations and other things. And most of the things that we have heard from Elon Musk in terms of technology ideas are transportation. So I think Tesla Motors is an automaker. That's what I would label them as. Now, Nicholas, I know you have a slightly different perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think it's a question of how you view the whole situation. When I think of a car maker, let's say a very traditional car maker like GM, Ford, Nissan, all these guys, I think of a company that designs basically three things, right? An engine, a rolling stock, and a body that goes on top of it. So they're very limited. They only work in that specific field. But this is the interesting thing with this whole paradigm change here now is all of a sudden an electric car ditches the gasoline engine. So it means a new form of energy that needs to be stored either on board or someone on board, and then it needs a new type of motor, something that traditional car makers can't do, and of course they can't make money on it yet because they don't have the right business model for that. Okay, yada yada, we all know that. But I think in that sense, it really puts Tesla into a different and unique category. And I'm going to get a little esoteric here. I think Tesla is also what needs to happen, quote unquote, what needs to happen going forward. I think in many ways the car industry has. I mean, let's face it, Aaron. It's been boring the last 20 years. Cars got heavier, fatter, thicker. Mickey Mouse cars that tend to please everyone, but really don't elicit any sort of passion anymore, right? So people are bored. People want something a little bit different, something unique, and putting different skirts on a car does not make it unique anymore. So I think there's that unspoken wish to have something different and everything, and all of a sudden, here comes Elon and Martin, and they say, hey, wouldn't it be great to have a zippy little electric car to go around and everything? Who says we can't have an electric car that's fun to drive, has tons of performance, and you know what? We'll figure out the whole range thing after that. So I think we're looking at kind of like somebody who likes French cheeses and somebody who likes Dutch cheeses. They're cheeses, but boy, are they different or what? So I think in that aspect, Tesla is much more than that. It's a much more holistic, and I mean holistic with a W, holistic company, because yeah, it does create a car, but I think that's really the sort of the end result of everything else it does. Tesla Motors is more of a philosophical enabler. It's the business 3.0 of, and you're right, transportation. And in order to do those electric cars, it knows that it needs to work with batteries, it needs to make them more energy dense, and it needs to make a whole electric motor and drive component that's cooler, that can handle the high torque and all that kind of good stuff and everything. So in many ways, I think it's much more than that. I think Tesla Ready really pinpoints it really well. It's a lifestyle company that happens to wrap it all together into a beautiful and efficient car. Because once you start to look at that, then you have to also ask, well, then what is the Gigafactory? What are the network of superchargers out there? That's not traditional car making territory. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I agree with that, but I think that those things happen because of the type of car they're making, not necessarily because they are Tesla is an energy company, or I would agree with you that they are a lifestyle marketing in terms of their marketing. They are a lifestyle company in terms of marketing, in the same way that Apple is, and in the same way that Maserati or some of the others. In fact, I just saw a
True.
really crappy commercial last night from Polo. Apparently, Ralph Lauren still thinks that we live in the 1980s. It's one of those
Well,
crappy.
judging by his design, I'm sure. Yeah, it is.
I mean, holy hell! This commercial was straight out of the '80s. A guy with slightly too long hair, and he's cruising in his $300,000 car, and the guy can't be more than 25, and he's got the chiseled everything, and then there's a girl on a boat in a bikini, yada yada, and
Oh my
all,
God,
the
haven't we
whole
seen
the
enough of
whole
that?
'80s thing.
Jeez
Holy crap! I was just waiting
Louise.
for Tom Selleck to show up in this commercial. So so anyway, I see, that is a persona that the company's creating for Polo, the brand, right? And I see Tesla as doing a lot of things that are creating the brand of Tesla. And the rest of the stuff they do with the charging stations, the Gigafactory, all that stuff, those are things that are part of building the kind of car they're building. So the Gigafactory, that has to exist if they're going to make their own batteries. Just
Right,
like Nissan has a battery shop that builds batteries in Smyrna, Tennessee. They make batteries for the
right,
Leaf at that
right.
shop. So it's not outside of the spectrum of being an automaker. And similarly, the charging network, Tesla had a choice. They could either go with a partnership with other companies like Nissan and Ford and so forth have done with to
Yes.
ChargePoint and so forth to make charging stations. Or because Tesla has a proprietary system, they build them themselves, and that's what they've done. So I don't see that as outside the realm of an automaker in terms of what kind of car they're making. So I don't see that as really a lifestyle thing either. I see it as part of the car. In order to sell cars and make them appealing to a broader audience, they have to have that. And Tesla was smart enough to know that they had to have those charging stations and things like that before the Model X and specifically the Model 3 come out. So they had to they had to have all that in place, because Joe Public is not going to have a whole lot of interest in a car that can go 200 miles if at the end of that 200 miles he can't plug it in somewhere, or if he has to plug it in and wait 22 hours for a full charge because all that's available is a 110 outlet. So all of that to me makes sense in terms of just being an automaker. But I would agree with you that their marketing is all about lifestyle, because the people who are buying the Model S are buying into a lifestyle the same way someone who buys like I said, a Maserati or any very high-end vehicle that is not the norm. I would also point out that an automaker doesn't necessarily have to design engines. Um, a lot of
Suzuki.
vehicles, like for a long time, the Alfa Romeo and other cars have had engines made by other companies in
That's
them.
true,
So
yeah. And unfortunately, not only made by other companies, but retweaked by them, which is really sad. You know,
yes,
the V6s and Alfa Romeos are GM blocks. God forbid. That Suzuki, I think, is a much better example of that. Suzuki doesn't really make anything but a body, if I'm correct, right?
well, I don't know. I know they have some engines. I just don't know if they're in automotive anymore. I think
Right.
that
Well, I'm
most of the
sorry. I
engines
meant
they're building
automotives.
are
Yeah.
in other vehicles
Yeah.
now.
I meant in their cars. I thought it was
Right.
pretty much a rebranding of another company, which I forgot at this moment.
Well, Suzuki has unique cars in a handful of markets, but it's mostly just Asia.
Yes.
Not really selling anything outside of that that, like you said, isn't just a rebadge. Um,
Yeah, but so that's you see that's the thing though. I think that and again I always love taking the big bird's eye view because I love looking at trends and I love looking at you know companies know that a market is only ripe for 10 to 15 years and after that you have to reinvent it and everything. So
mhm.
in the 80s we saw a lull, right? In the 90s and let's bring in Apple. We have to bring in Apple, right? Especially when you talk about Tesla, right? Jeez Louise, are we ever going to get away from that one? No, 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 no. So the brilliance of Steve Jobs was that in the 90s when he was rebuilding the late 90s when he was rebuilding the company into the early 2000s is that he used that stereotype, that cliche of the 90s kid with the punked out hair, go devil, look what's the expression here? I'm trying to get two expressions in one, but anyway, the carefree lifestyle, listening to an iPod, which at the time didn't exist, and all that kind of stuff. So he capitalized on that, and the brilliance was showing a silhouette without even really showing it. And I think that was a new trend. And so what Tesla does now is they sort of kick it up another notch here. And the new trend, at least for these guys, is very simple. You have an electric vehicle. It's early technology. It's so outside the beaten path. So who's going to buy that? Obviously, people making more than $150,000 a year, or about $100,000 a year, let's say, who are technically savvy, who are technically inclined, and most likely Silicon Valley kind of people. So I think the marketing was really well done for them. I think where it's going to change now, by the way, is the Gen 3 Model 3 car. That's going to be an interesting piece of marketing because you can't market that car the same way you've been marketing the Roadster and the Model S and the Model X. So I think you're right to a certain extent. You could consider it a car maker, but at the same time, I don't see any car maker, correct me if I'm wrong, that actually has their own petroleum or diesel factory and actually have a network to like gas pumps and everything like that. And I think this is where Tesla is highly different and also spells the way going forward is. And I think even Nissan to a certain extent gets it that in order for their Leafs to be really to do really really well outside of their sales departments is that they need to build those CHAdeMO networks, which they are doing, by the way. And also, I mean, you saw how they're also giving you 2 years worth of free charging and everything too. So I think that's the difference between a mainstream car maker. Is a mainstream car maker makes the car, makes the technology, gets it out there, and you know what? After that, ExxonMobil takes care of pinching pennies until the end of the cycle. In many ways, I think this is what's so different about Tesla, and why I think Tesla sort of heralds a new business, a new lifestyle, is that they really handle everything. Which, by the way, should be very scary, right? You all
Well,
know that. I mean, look at Apple. Hello.
I think that we're
Ruffling your feathers.
mostly agreeing on everything. The difference that I see is I see Tesla doing what they're doing with charging stations and so forth as a byproduct of the fact that they're making electric cars. Um, in the early days of gasoline cars, there were a lot of automakers at the time who were investing in or installing gas pumps. Back in the day, when you bought an Oldsmobile, for example, you probably fueled it at the Oldsmobile dealership that you bought it from, the little
Yes,
dealer in your little town. Uh, that's
that's
that's because at the time finding places that sold gasoline were it was few and far between,
didn't
and then on
exist.
on
Yeah.
top of that, you have a car that's top
You
speed
know,
was like 20 miles an hour,
Do you
but
know what's interesting though is that's an American thing because I do not recall anybody in Europe doing that, and I could be wrong, right? So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall any of the European brands making that. Also because I guess World War I or World War II probably put a big crimp in the whole system, but yeah, I don't recall
well, the
anyone
other
doing that.
thing I
So
would
that's
point out
interesting.
is that in Europe, the distances between 2 points are much shorter than they are here. So
However, the
it would
roads
have
are
been
smaller, narrower, windier.
right.
But no, you're right. That's a very good point. I never thought of
That's what
that.
I would get to is just to say that in Europe, when somebody bought a car, they were probably within driving distance of all of the next towns
Yeah, but
in
think about it
line
though. I mean, in,
easily.
in, in many ways, Tesla also does something that not even Oldsmobile could do because they have a network where you can drive in every corner of the country and even
Yeah, but
abroad.
that's also a product of timing. 100 years ago, how easy was it to build something that went all the way across the country? We had just recently, before that, finished the railroad that did that. So it's
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
difference. And then also we're talking about a car that is capable of over 100 miles an hour versus a car back then that was capable of about 25. So
Yeah, no, it's true.
yeah.
No, but
So,
I still see it as very different. I can't just say it's a car maker because it's much more than that. I think those cars are more an IT. They're rolling computers more than anything.
oh
I still
yes, yeah.
more. I mean, for me, it's a technology company more than anything. And this is where I think most car makers are having a hard time because they're traditional brick and mortar companies. They're having a hard time with the transition and the switch to fully IT, and which is really sad because if you think about it, what's the one thing that they can bring into this world is the knowledge, the expertise, the experience they have with rolling platforms and everything. So what? So you lose the gasoline tank and the gasoline engine. Well, you know what? Work with other companies who know how to make electric motors, and there are plenty of battery companies out there. So I think, yeah, I
Well,
think in many ways it really is. Again, it's a company. Tesla is a company that started out with totally different roots that what was offered at the time. The roots at the time was, what does GM do? Let's do the same thing at our level with our niche market. No, you know what? Forget it. We're not going to look at them. Let's just do what we want to do. And by the way, that's the sign of an entrepreneur. And both Martin and Elon are entrepreneurs. Is you wake up one morning and you're like, why can't I do that? Why doesn't this thing work better? This thing should be doing this, and that. And they go out there and they make it happen. So that's why for me, I'll never equate Tesla. And by the way, we've been saying this for years now. It is not a company. It is not a car maker. It's a technology company. They just wrap it all up together in a car.
see, and the way I see it though is I think Tesla is a car maker. They're just doing it in a very different way because of the new technology they're bringing with that car. Because they're the
Yeah,
only right now they're the only successful car maker that is only making electric cars. Um,
true.
but they're also not the best seller, and they're not the top company or whatever, however you want to metric, whatever
Right,
you
right,
want
of
to
course.
measure them by. But um, I agree with your point that they are a technology company, but the technology is transportation. And so that
Yeah,
makes them, in my mind, an automaker because they're making something that has, rubber wheels on the road that drives along on its own, and you sit inside of it, so that
yeah,
it's a car.
but you
So
know what? That's a very good point. What you're making. It is a transportation company because it is all about transportation. And whether you're right, whether we look at SpaceX or Tesla, it is transportation. I think that the paradigm is that the means of transportation is different than what the traditional car
right.
makers have been doing. So this is where they really come out, and they're breaking outside the box, and they're breaking the mold, and that's fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
a good point.
I don't want to detract from the innovation the company has had, but I do want to point out that they're not the only ones, and they're not necessarily the best ones, depending on, what sort of metric of measurement you want to use. The BMW i3 is outselling the Model S right now. It, but
You
give it
know,
a year, will the Model X
well,
outsell the
yeah.
i3? That, who
Yeah,
knows?
and that's actually
Um,
that's a whole topic we could do on another podcast. Is how
yeah,
you know remember how a few months ago, 6 months ago, I was asking are we seeing an EV and a hybrid lull in the market right now? And everybody was like, no, no, no. Well, look at all the magazines, all the newspapers, all the news websites. Right now, everybody says that exactly that. But you're right. That's a very good point. The much misloved BMW i3 is outselling everything right now. Well, it's new. It's new and it's new, and exactly in 1 year, you're right. It's not going to do as
yeah.
well, and they know that. And by the
Well,
way,
and
I actually like the
on the
i3. I think
same
it's a
token,
neat little
Nicholas, I
car. I
would
don't know
point
why
out.
people don't like that because I think it would look really great next to a Model S.
Well, what I will point out though is that the i3 is a very different car than the Model S. It's
Completely.
more akin to the Model X that's about to come out than it is to the Model S we're looking at right now. And even then, it's not quite the same. The BMW i3 is very, very much, I think, as
It's a city
Musk
car.
and others are envisioning the Model 3 that they're going to be
Absolutely.
doing.
Absolutely.
So
It will be the
it's
competition to the
basically
Model
early
3,
competition,
whatever it's
right?
called. Maybe the Model 4 at the time it
In
comes out.
my mind, the
I mean,
nearest
i4.
competition we're going to see, the soonest we're going to see real competition for that i3 is going to be when Nissan's Infiniti comes out with theirs. And even then, I think Infiniti is going to go towards the sport end of things and become more of a Model S competitor than an i3
You know
competitor.
that I think
But
that's well.
that's
I think
that's market that's
yeah.
market speculation. We're kind of
Yeah, I
talking.
think you're right because we're always looking at Nissan, and I think Nissan's new Leaf that's about to come out in a year or so. I think it might be competition, but no, you're right. Actually, Infinity will take that. I would not discount the i3, whether you call it the i4 or whatever facelift they're going to give the car. That will be also a serious competitor because BMW is ticked off at Tesla right now. BMW is pissed off because Tesla is outselling their cars right now. So I'm wondering who else would have a good contender for that. Certainly not. Well, maybe Honda don't. Well, well, no, they don't know
Yeah,
what's
I don't think I would count on Honda or Toyota coming. Uh,
Toyota definitely not. They're not interested in electric cars. They want
yeah,
hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells. That's
and
irrelevant.
Honda,
Uh,
I think, is going to do the same thing. They're going to be pushing
I'm
FCV
afraid,
for
yeah,
the next 2 3 years.
the conversations I've had with them is don't worry, we're working on some great things, and everybody talks about hydrogen. It's like, oh, guys,
Um,
really?
what I
The
would
Honda Fit
say,
EV was such a cool little car. Come on.
is I would turn people up to Detroit and say, watch Ford. I think you're going to see some
Yes.
stuff come out of Ford that will be so really surprising to the
Yes.
usual EV crowd.
Ford right now is playing such a devilish game. They're not talking, which of course is really, I mean, it's just incites curiosity, right? They're not talking. They're working behind the
Well, and it's
scenes.
highly unusual
They're
for Ford.
It's highly unusual, and you know what it also means? They're very smart. Ever since that 2008 crash when they came out on top, they know that they have a fighting chance to stay on top for once, but also they know what's happening. They see the mistake GM is making. They see the mistakes Chrysler is doing also, and they're just really levering out the playing field. That power of choice philosophy is just duh. It's a smart philosophy.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're going to
it's
surprise us. And by the way, the Ford Focus Electric is still one of my favorite EVs. It's a great car.
yeah. Well, the way I see it is Ford's power of choice is a perfect, almost perfect integration of my and I think your philosophy on the way automotive is going to look for the next probably 50, 75, even maybe 100 years, where
Yes.
you have a vehicle that is made and it's one model, so it's a C-Max or a Fusion or whatever, and But when you go to buy the car, you
Yeah.
don't buy the same car that the guy down the block or the next town over or the next state over bought because you chose a different powertrain for the same car. So
Yeah, and you know
mine
what?
might be
Maybe
hydrogen, yours might be natural gas, the other guy might get the
exactly.
electric one, somebody
Yeah.
might decide they want the
You
hybrid, whatever.
Exactly. You live next to refineries, so guess what? Hydrogen will be a much better thing for you. It's easier. It's a byproduct of those refineries. For me, I live in California. Most likely, it's going to be electric. There are lots of solar
Hmm.
panels everywhere, and so on and so forth. And no, I do see it like that, and I think you're right. Ford is onto something big. Plus, you know what? I went to these Go Further events, and I got to tell you, I was really astonished by Ford's breadth of activity, but also its far-sightedness. It
Oh
sees
yeah.
so far down the future that it makes you think, how far does Tesla look into the future? And they're looking far, of course, but Ford is, I would say, is as well diversified into the future as probably Tesla is, and I'm sure that's
And
going to
it's
rile up a few people,
interesting to
but
me
that's the
to
way it is.
watch how these companies just take three examples. Take Tesla Motors, Ford, and Nissan, and put them kind of on the table in front of you and look at them, and see the differences and the similarities. You see the way that they're kind of spreading their game, doing things and looking way far into the future. Nissan has an advantage because they are truly an international company. In other
True.
words, they're not just international in terms of they build things in other countries all over the world, but they're international in terms of all of their management and everything is from all over the place. They're not just from Japan or just from Europe or
True.
whatever. And in fact, Nissan's new guy, when Andy Palmer left, which was supposed to be pretty big news, but honestly, Andy Palmer, he was a big mouthpiece in terms
Yes, he
of
was.
talking about electric
Really
cars.
great guy, by the way.
But he's different. I don't think he was what was really needed for Nissan. And now they've pulled a guy from BMW who has much more of what Infinity specifically needs. Um, his name is Kruger. And then also you look at Ford. So Nissan, truly diverse, truly international company. You look at Ford. Ford is an extremely well-established company. They're in a very good, despite the BS reports from Wall Street. Ford is in a very, very good financial position right now, and also Ford has a long, uh, a long list of experts in everything you can name. And Ford, most people probably don't know this, but Ford holds an annual event where they sit down with a panel of experts who are not from Ford, and they talk about
Yes. Yes.
energy and efficiency and things all along those lines.
Oh,
Ford
Ford
knows a
is
lot of what's
huge.
going on. And then
Fo-
Tesla Motors, who is kind of the shake-up company. These are the guys who everybody is pretending not to watch, in the industry, and they're kind of doing their own thing, and they're traditionally pulling some things from because they're making a car, they have to have a plant for it, and they have to have experts in building cars. But outside of that, like you say, their technology, it's totally different from what the other people are doing, in a very different perspective and way of doing it. So watch those three companies, and I think what you're seeing in those three companies is the future of automotive. Any other company I can name off the top of my head who makes cars is following them, not leading. So I would just say, with very few exceptions, I think every automaker outside of those three is basically catching up most of the time. So
I totally agree. I think the car companies of the future is definitely Tesla, Ford, and Nissan. But I'll say one thing though. There is one competition that's sort of under the radar right now. It's BMW. I think
mhm.
they're doing the right things. I just don't know if they're going to make it, kind of thing, right? I mean, if you look at the i3, I like the i3 because it's carbon neutral. It's
Yeah,
pretty amazing.
yeah.
It's carbon neutral. It does not. It's carbon
which
footprint,
which was a
which
big
is a big thing,
thorn in
especially
Musk's foot.
yeah, exactly, especially coming from a German car maker who loves
Yeah.
diesels. Duh. Wow, that's a pretty
Well,
interesting one.
the,
So I think
the Germans
they're
right
doing the
now
right
are
things.
leading
Yeah,
leading the
yeah.
charge in
Yeah,
carbon
they are, and
neutrality.
rightfully
Just
so. They have a lot of money. They
yeah.
know what to do with it, and this is something that Tesla doesn't have. They don't have a lot of money to put into all that kind of stuff. But, however, so I really think that BMW might be a good competition for these three.
The
We'll
the
see, but
reason
it's
that I didn't
changing.
include BMW in my list, specifically Bimmers, but all of BMW, is because the company itself is still very traditionalist in most ways, and also because BMW on the world market is still a relatively small player um, compared to Nissan
Tesla.
and Ford specifically, uh, and the top player in the world right now is, it depends on how you measure it, but most people would say it's either Toyota um, or the Volkswagen Group, but
Yeah, it depends on how you measure it. You're right.
right, depends on how it's measured, but neither one of those companies is really looking that far ahead. Toyota is still very, very Japanese, and until they pull away from that, they're not going to be ahead. They might always be the largest automaker, but they're not necessarily going to be the automaker that's bringing the new stuff. Um, what Toyota has done is they've mastered what sells cars up to this point, and probably for the next 10 years, and that is being standout without being standout. They make cars that are what, auto journalists like to say they're boring, every single one of them. But that's because boring sells. Toyota makes cars that look good and feel good and seem good on all levels, right? They please everybody kind of cars, but they don't do anything that is out of the ordinary, so they don't scare anybody, right? That's what Toyota has mastered. They've mastered that. And that is what sells in most of the major auto segments. Mid-sized cars, minivans, things like that. That's what people want. They want boring. So we've talked about that before. Boring equals
Yeah,
good in most people's minds.
absolutely. Reliable.
Right. Boring equals reliable and good. So that's what Toyota has mastered, and that's why they're at the top of the food chain in cars.
For now,
But
yes.
for now, right. The problem is that they don't tend to play ahead of the game in technology very often. The Prius, in my mind, was kind of a fluke,
Well, the
and I
Prius
think
was a
that
fluke, and
the reason they
yeah,
made honestly, I think the reason they made the Prius was purely because they knew Honda was making something, and they thought,
yeah,
wow, we better not get beat by Honda, because that rivalry is a lot, used to be, I don't know that it is so much anymore, but
yeah.
in the 80s and 90s, that rivalry was I mean, that was, Pittsburgh Steelers versus Cowboys kind of rivalry there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we'll see anything much from Toyota in a long time, which is really
But
funny considering the
we're a
news that
little
we
bit
had
off
about
topic.
Tesla
I should
saying
point
that
that out.
we're totally off topic. Which, by the way, we should probably bring it home now. Anyway, we're
Yeah.
hitting the hour. But I guess in the end, it's kind of hard to figure out. I still think that, and again, I'm putting myself in the shoes of mainstream Joe Schmo kind of thing. But Tesla for me is not a car maker. It's so beyond a car maker. It's sort of the Borg versus human beings kind of thing. It's so adaptive. It knows where it's going. It knows what it needs to do, and it sort of defies the common notion of what a car maker is. So I guess that's how I'm looking at it.
And I'm just seeing it from a slightly different perspective. Tesla's new and young. They're still small. So all of those things will automatically apply to them just because of what they are. And then they're dealing in a technology that is almost brand new in the automotive market. So in those respects, yes, everything you said is completely correct. But in my mind, they're still making cars. So they are an automaker, and their primary focus is transportation, which is an automotive thing. I do agree, though, that their marketing specifically is very, very different from everybody else. Um, and I think that's a product, again, of just the era we live in, the time we are in, and the fact that they are brand new, so they can harness that, whereas the other guys are going to have to, think about it and have board meetings and whatever, and then their marketing department is going to have to eventually swing around and finally get to it, whatever. So,
I feel
it's
really
just a
bad,
difference,
I feel bad for them. It's like you're a 50-year-old, and this is pretty much my case, but a 50-year-old IT guy who was a wizard, years ago, and then you see these new kids coming in, and they know so many script languages, they know all that
Yeah.
stuff and everything, and you're like, I don't know how to compete with that at all. But I do have one thing, experience, which somehow, somewhere is going to get me in back in the game one way or the other. But anyway, so yeah, no, I think you're right. I think both points are very valid. Nonetheless, I think Tesla is definitely going forward and opening new doors that the car makers or the automotive industry, traditional mainstream automotive industry, will have to open at one point, a place or another. And you're right. I think Nissan is definitely well poised. Although I think Ford probably has the wider point of view, at least the wider futuristic global view on it. But it's going to be interesting. At least we're not going to see, GM versus Toyota with, my gosh, how boring can the car be kind of fight again. So,
Yeah.
so that's one good thing. One good thing that we can look forward to. But
Well,
I guess we should wrap it up now.
yeah,
And
to wrap this up, I'm just going to give everybody a vision. This is a vision of the automotive industry as a whole. I just want you to kind of close your eyes and think about this. Think about Ralph Macchio from the Karate Kid, right? He's got the
good.
bandana thing on his head, that whatever the hell that is, around his head to make it look like he knows karate, right? And he's standing there in all his gangly glory, and he's got an iPod, and he's listening to some sort of turn of the century, meaning turn of the 21st century techno on that iPod, and he's standing there and he's kind of jamming to it a little bit, and then he makes that stance, one leg in the air, both arms out. There you go. And what pulls up and what does he leap into? Roadster.
I was going to say a big oil puddle, but you're right. Yes.
I just had
Alrighty.
that
Well,
vision. It's the teenage use of LSD that causes that sort of thing to
I was
happen
just gonna
when
say,
you're older.
it's slightly reminiscent of a flashback, isn't it? Well, folks, that's the difference when you drink coffee in the morning, like Aaron does, or tea, like I do. It affects you in very different ways. Anyway, this is Nicholas Zart signing off for Car News Cafe and our good friends at Tesla Ready. Hope you have a great week. We'll have more to talk about next week. In the meantime, yes, we'll hear more about Tesla next week and the following week and the following week and the following week. You know the drill. Have fun.
And this is Aaron from carnewscafe.com. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Wherever you
We
are.
will talk to you again very soon.